People principle, number 11. Probably of all the people principles, this is the most difficult. This is the confrontation principle. And the confrontation principle basically says caring for people should precede confronting them. Conflict is like cancer. Early detection increases the possibility of a healthy outcome. And the question I must ask myself is, do I care enough to confront the right way? Now, let me just stop here for a moment. Let's go back to what this principle is all about. Caring for people should precede confronting them. In fact, I'm going to go out on the limb here. If you don't care for them, my guess is that if you do confront them, you will do it incorrectly. The foundation of confrontation must be a desire to help people, not a desire to hurt people. That is the line I always look for. When somebody says, I've got to go confront somebody at work, I've got to go confront somebody, I got to confront somebody in the family. If I have a moment, I always ask them, do you really care for that person, and do you really desire for them to succeed? If so, go confront. But if somehow you're wanting to give them a piece of your mind, you're wanting to put them in their place, you're wanting to let them know where they stand, we have trouble. So comments about conflict. One, it's unavoidable. You know, what do they always say? Death and taxes, you know what I mean? Let me tell you something else, conflict. When you deal with people, you know, as long as Adam lived alone, there was not much conflict. Although most people I know, if they lived alone and met no one else, they would still have major conflict. I have met the enemy, and it is me. But when Eve appeared, sparks are going to fly. Number two, it's difficult. Confrontation is difficult. In fact, I used to do a conference on how to confront and how to deal with conflict. And I would always ask this question, how many of you right now have conflict with somebody? And it would be 100%. Everybody raise their hand. If I ask you today, everybody has conflict with somebody. We all do. I do. You do. We all do. Okay. But interesting enough, I'd say, how many of you have sat down in a correct way privately and dealt with the issue with that person? And we would go from 100% to about 5%. In other words, the vast majority of the people have really never done or dealt with the situation. So, number three, how we handle conflict determines our success in tough situations. For example, let me give you some wrong strategies in dealing with conflict. Strategies such as win at all cost. That's not why you have confrontation. That's not why you deal with conflict. Your goal isn't to win at all cost. It's like a shootout at the OK Corral. It's quick, brutal, and destructive. Or, here's another wrong strategy. Pretend it doesn't exist. If you hear no evil, see no evil, and speak no evil, evil will not cease to exist. Or three, oh, this one's very hard on me. Whine about it. I have a heavy dislike for whiners. Winners aren't whiners, and whiners aren't winners. And playing the victim doesn't cure the conflict, it just irritates everybody. At least it irritates me. Or another wrong strategy is keep score. People who keep a record of wrongs can't ever start over fresh, and nobody can ever get even. Don't you know some people, they just keep score. They just keep score. Another one is pull rank. Using position never really resolves conflict. It merely postpones it. Or sometimes we white flag it, which is pure surrender. We just quit. So let me give you what I would call a roadmap for healthy confrontation. Conflict resolution isn't complicated. Intellectually, it's simple, but emotionally, it can be difficult. It requires honesty, humility, and dedication to the relationship. Here's the 6-step plan. Number one, confront a person only if you care for that person. We've already talked about that. But always check your heart before you confront. Number two, meet together as soon as possible. In other words, if there is conflict to deal with and confrontation, it doesn't help in just constantly delaying it. In fact, in your second paragraph in your note, Consultant Fred Smith, who has been one of my mentors in leadership, spoke of his experience. And here's what he said: whenever I'm tempted not to act in a difficult personnel situation, I ask myself, am I holding back for my personal comfort, or am I holding back for the good of the organization? And I thought, what a wonderful way to separate emotionally, because we all hold back. Because let me tell you something. Let me just do a little survey. How many of you have ever had to confront somebody on something and perhaps procrastinated a little bit before doing it? Boy, that is the common denominator of all of us, isn't it, huh? We know we should, but boy, we find 17 reasons why, and why we shouldn't, couldn't, and haven't. Fred Smith said, when I'm holding back in confrontation, am I doing that because of me personally, or am I doing that for the good of the organization? Because, for their example, maybe a leader will have to hold back for a period of time because the timing's not right. But am I doing it because the timing's not right, or am I doing it because I'm not ready to do it yet? By the way, the reason I say confront as soon as possible, there is a thing that I see that causes tremendous problems. I call it gunny sacking. That's not the right word, but basically it's where somebody has issues with somebody, and instead of telling them, they just put it in the gunny sack. And they just keep putting stuff in there. And one day, all hell breaks loose. And they start talking, and they say, well, let me tell you this, and by the way, and then there's this issue, and then we got that issue, and 4 years ago that happened, and they just kill them. And I've always had a very simple principle with anybody I've ever worked with. All the presidents of my companies, anybody I've ever worked with, I have a very simple principle. If there is a problem, you will know about it immediately. You never need to look at me and say, is he having a problem with me? Does he have an issue with me? Is there something he needs to fix? No, no, no. You will know about it immediately. I never gunny sack, because I don't want it to happen to me from someone, and I would never do it to someone else. Number 3, first seek understanding, not necessarily agreement. Now, this is where conflict many times and confrontation does not succeed. We're trying to get agreement instead of understanding. Now, let me go on here. A significant hindrance to positive conflict resolution is having too many preconceived notions going into a confrontation. There's a saying, the person who gives an opinion before he understands is human, but the person who gives a judgment before he understands is a fool. Abraham Lincoln was well known for his tremendous people skills. He remarked, when I'm getting ready to reason with a man, I spend 1/3 of my time thinking about myself and what I'm going to say, and 2/3 of the time thinking about him and what he's going to say. What a good rule of thumb. Kettering said, there's a great difference between knowing and understanding. You can know a lot about something and not really understand it. Number 4, outline the issue. And I have 3 thoughts about outlining the issue. Describe your perceptions, and let them know when you describe your perceptions that what I see could be totally wrong. Please feel free to correct me. 2, tell how it makes you feel. Let them know if it makes you angry or if it frustrates you. And finally, explain why this is important to you. Here's the reason we're talking about this. It's not to make me feel better. We're talking about this because we have to fix it so that our relationship can be what it can be and we can do things successfully together. Okay, number 5, encourage a response. One statement out of that long paragraph. One of the best ways to persuade others is with your ears, by listening to them. When confronting people, I've discovered the following. This is very true. 50% of the time, people don't realize there is a problem. In other words, when you sit down and confront people, half the time they didn't realize there was even a problem. So therefore, in confronting them, it's just kind of like, oh my goodness, thanks for telling me. I didn't have a clue. 30% of them realized there was a problem, but they didn't know how to solve it. So the very fact that you're sitting down with them is helping the two of you to solve it, and 20% realized that there was a problem, but they did not want to solve it. The bad news is that 1 out of 5 people really does not want to seek positive resolution. The good news is that 80% of the time there is great potential to solve the conflict.